Arsenal had every reason to win today. Every single reason. I was watching the team news come through this morning, and honestly, for a brief moment, I thought, this is it. This is genuinely Arsenal's day, and I think most of you watching felt exactly the same thing. 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League. Manchester City hadn't won in 5 games. Ruben Dias was out with a hamstring injury. Guardiola was already gone for the season, and the manager walking into this final had been outperformed in the league all campaign long. On paper, and I mean genuinely, objectively, on paper, this was Arsenal's final to win. So I want to ask you something straight away, and I want you to actually sit with this before we get into the detail. How does a team with every single one of those advantages walk out of Wembley with nothing? Because here is the thing, the answer is not what most people are saying tonight. And there is one specific moment in this match. It happened before the first goal, before half-time, before anything most people are discussing, that explains everything. We will get to that shortly. If you stay with me through this, I think you will come away seeing this final in a completely different way to the headlines you have been reading. Let us get into it. First, let me set the scene properly. Because if you do not understand what City were coming into this final with, you will not fully appreciate what actually went wrong for Arsenal. This detail matters more than people realise. Manchester City arrived at Wembley in genuinely poor form. 1 win in 5 matches, knocked out of the Champions League by Real Madrid. A squad that has gone through serious reconstruction since last season. De Bruyne gone, Walker gone, Ederson gone. Guardiola has been rebuilding this group in real time, and the results on the pitch have reflected exactly that all season. Arsenal, by contrast, came in having just beaten Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League round of 6, top of the Premier League by 9 points. A squad with depth, with quality and with genuine belief built across the entire campaign. Now add one more layer to that picture, and this is where it starts to get interesting. Arteta walked into Wembley without Martin Odegaard, without Jurrien Timber. 2 of his 4 best outfield players were either unavailable or not risked. And in goal, instead of David Raya, he started Kepa Arrizabalaga. I want to come back to that goalkeeper decision in detail later, because what I found when I looked closely at both goals surprised me more than I expected. But first we need to establish the full picture. Hold all of that in your mind, because every single thing that happened over those 90 minutes flows directly from it. So here is the central question I want to work through today. And honestly, this is the question that will define how we look back at this final for a long time. Did Arteta's decision to start Kepa cost Arsenal a trophy? Or is that just too easy an explanation for something that actually runs much deeper? I want to be honest with you, I went back and forth on this myself before sitting down to make this video. There are 2 ways to read this result. The first is simple. Kepa made a critical error. Arsenal conceded twice in 4 minutes. Final over, goalkeeper takes the blame, everyone moves on. The second reading is harder to accept, but it is more honest. And it says that Arsenal's loss today was not a mistake made in the 59th minute. It was a structural inevitability that started building much, much earlier than that. I will explain exactly what I mean by that, but to do it properly, I need to show you something that happened in the first 15 minutes that almost nobody is talking about right now. Let me start with something that is being almost completely ignored in the post-match reaction. Because Arsenal actually played well in the opening stages. They really did. Here is the part most viewers missed. In the first 15 minutes, they were the better team. Clearly, they pressed with intensity, created space through City's defensive line, and generated 3 genuine chances in quick succession. Havertz, Saka. 3 attempts, all denied by James Trafford in that remarkable triple save. Now, stop there for a second, because this is where my view on the entire match changed. That triple save from Trafford, right there, that is the single most important moment in this entire match. Not the first goal, not the second goal. That save in the early stages. And I will explain precisely why in a moment. Think about what City's defensive situation actually was coming into this final. Poor form, fragile collective confidence, a centre-back partnership of Kusanov and Ake without their most experienced leaders anywhere near the pitch. If Arsenal convert even one of those 3 chances, City are behind. Their confidence breaks. That backline starts to come apart under pressure. Here is the conclusion that took me a while to accept. Arsenal did not lose this final in the 59th minute. They lost it in the 12th. The moment they failed to convert that window of absolute dominance was the moment the door started to close. And that is a distinction that genuinely matters, because it tells us this result was not purely about Kepa. Arsenal had the opportunity to make Kepa's error completely irrelevant before half-time. They did not take it. But this is where everything shifts, because what happened at half-time is where the real tactical story of this final begins. Right, so what changed at the interval? Because this is where Guardiola earns his money. This is what he does. This is where things changed. The first half ended with just 7 shots between the two teams. Tight, cautious, neither side able to break the other down. Looks like a stalemate on the surface, but underneath it, City were already adjusting. And when I looked at what Guardiola actually changed, something became clear that reframes both goals entirely. Let's take a note. Guardiola pushed his shape wider. Doku on the left, Semenyo on the right, both given licence to drive directly at Arsenal's fullbacks and stretch the defensive block horizontally. Suddenly, Arsenal's width, which is usually their weapon, was being used against them. And here is the tactical detail I want you to pay attention to, because it explains both goals completely. Something important happened here, and we will come back to it in a moment. Nico O'Reilly was playing as a left-back. That is his role in this system. But his actual function in the second half was not to defend. His function was to arrive late into the penalty area from deep off the ball after the wider players had already drawn Arsenal's defensive attention. Look at the first goal. Cherki's cross comes in high and dropping. Kepa moves to claim it and misjudges it completely. The ball drops directly to O'Reilly at the back post with an empty net in front of him. That is not an accidental moment. That is a designed moment. Guardiola knew that a high dropping cross into that specific area of the 6-yard box would create maximum difficulty for a goalkeeper whose aerial decision-making under pressure is a documented weakness. 4 minutes later, Matheus Nunes crosses from the right. O'Reilly arrives late, completely unmarked, inside the 6-yard box again. Header 2-0, same late run, same delivery type. Same defensive tracking failure from Arsenal. Now here is the part I want you to sit with, because this is where the goalkeeping narrative gets more complicated, not less. Both goals came from headed finishes inside the 6-yard box. That is not coincidence, that is preparation. Guardiola built his attacking patterns around Arsenal's specific vulnerabilities on this particular day, and Arsenal allowed O'Reilly the identical free run twice in 4 minutes. That is not just a goalkeeping problem, that is a structural and concentration failure from the entire defensive unit. And that leads us directly to the conversation we cannot avoid. But, and this is where I want to be really direct with you, we cannot sidestep the Kepa conversation. It would be dishonest to do so. And honestly, the closer I looked at this, the more uncomfortable it became. This detail matters more than people realise. Arteta's logic for starting him is understandable, genuinely. Kepa played every single Carabao Cup round this season. He performed well throughout the competition. In football, you reward the players who earned the right to be there. That is a principle rooted in culture, in trust, in the kind of environment Arteta has spent years carefully building at Arsenal. And that principle is not wrong. In the quarterfinals, it is sound. In the semi-finals, it is sound. In every round that got Arsenal to Wembley, it is completely sound. But here is the honest reality, and this is the point where my thinking shifted the most. There is a point at which principle has to yield to pure performance optimization. A Wembley final with the quadruple still alive, with 9 points at the top of the league, creating a genuine opportunity to define an entire era. That is precisely that point. David Raya is Arsenal's best goalkeeper. He is a sweeper keeper who initiates build-up play from the back with real confidence and precision. His distribution is a functional component of how Arsenal press the pitch. His aerial command is reliable. His decision-making under a dropping ball is exactly what Kepa failed to provide on the hour mark. Starting Kepa in this final was not a mistake viewed in isolation. It was a mistake in context against a manager who analyses opponent vulnerabilities with forensic attention to detail. Presenting a known weakness in the most important position on the pitch was always going to carry serious risk. And the risk materialised exactly as the analytical evidence suggested it could. The honest assessment, Arteta's man management is one of his greatest qualities as a manager. It is a genuine strength, and I say this as someone who has enormous respect for the culture he has built at this club. But elite management sometimes demands making the difficult decision that protects the result, even at the cost of the principle. Guardiola would not have started his cup competition goalkeeper in a Wembley final if his best goalkeeper was available and fit. That is the benchmark, and on this occasion Arteta did not reach it. But here is what I did not fully expect to find when I looked deeper. The goalkeeper decision is only part of the story. And the larger part, the part that carries real weight for the rest of this season, is something most of the post-match conversation is not getting close to. Now, I want to go one level deeper, because there is a bigger story sitting underneath all of this. Here is the part most viewers missed. Arteta has won 4 of 17 meetings with Guardiola. 4 from 17, that is not variance, that is a pattern. And I want to be precise about what that pattern is actually telling us, because when I went through those 17 matches looking for the common thread, what I found was not what I initially expected. It is not simply that Arteta cannot beat Guardiola. It is more specific than that, and this matters enormously for what comes next in this season. In this recurring dynamic, Guardiola's teams consistently identify Arsenal's build-up dependencies and cut them at the source. Odegaard as the press trigger and creative engine, the wide forwards as the primary attacking outlets, the goalkeeper as the build-up initiator. Remove those elements through injury, through selection, through tactical suppression, and Arsenal become a different team, more lateral in possession, less incisive, easier to defend against. Today, before a ball was kicked, Guardiola had 3 of those factors working in his favour. No Odegaard, no Timber, Kepa instead of Raya. Whether those absences were purely injury-related or included precautionary management for future fixtures, the outcome was the same. Arsenal faced City's final form with a reduced version of their own. And that is the question that has to sit with Arteta now. Not just how to beat City, but how to build a version of Arsenal that is not so structurally dependent on a handful of specific players that removing them fundamentally changes the team's identity. Because if the Champions League run continues, and I fully expect it to, that dependency will be tested again by opponents who have done exactly the same homework Guardiola did. We will come back to what that means for the rest of this season in just a moment. Now, let me be very clear about what today does not mean, because this matters, and I think it is important that we as Arsenal supporters, as people who care about where this club is going, hold on to some perspective here. Arsenal are 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League with 7 games remaining. The title is in their hands. One cup final defeat does not rewrite the exceptional quality of this league campaign. That reality is completely intact. The FA Cup quarter-final is still alive. A genuine opportunity to end this season with silverware remains on the table. The Champions League quarter-final against Sporting CP is a winnable fixture. Arsenal's European form has been strong all season, their knockout football has been composed, and there is no reasonable basis for believing that Wembley fundamentally alters that trajectory. What today does is sharpen the questions that were already there. It does not create new ones from nothing. The questions about big occasion performance, about decision-making at critical junctures, about this squad's capacity for composure when a trophy is directly in front of them, those questions existed before kickoff. Wembley made them louder. It did not generate them. So let us not catastrophize, but let us also not minimize. This was a final Arsenal should have won, and they did not win it. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. And what happens next? This is where it gets genuinely fascinating. So where does the club go from here? What are we actually watching for over the next few weeks? This is where things get interesting. The immediate Premier League fixtures matter, not because the title is under threat, it is not, but because how a group responds to a high-profile defeat tells you something real about the depth of their character that no pre-match press conference ever can. The Sporting CP tie in the Champions League is the next genuine measuring stick for Arsenal's European ambitions. Their form in Europe has earned the right to that stage. Now they have to perform on it with the noise of Wembley still in the background. And there are specific things to keep your eye on, and I think some of these will tell us far more about this Arsenal side than the final itself did. Watch how Arteta addresses the goalkeeper decision publicly. That will tell you something about how he manages scrutiny and whether he is willing to be direct with his audience. Watch whether Odegaard returns to full availability for the next fixture and what that implies about today's selection. And watch the dressing room response through the next performance, because that will say more about this group than anything said in a post-match interview. The summer will bring its own important decisions. The goalkeeper hierarchy needs a clear and definitive resolution before next season begins, whether that means committing fully to Raya, finding a new number 1, or redefining Kepa's role. That cannot go into a potential Champions League campaign without clarity. But before we get to the summer, there is still a conclusion to this season that genuinely matters. And it starts with how Arsenal respond in the next few weeks. Let me leave you with this thought, and I want you to sit with it after the video ends. Manchester City won the Carabao Cup today. They earned it on the day. Nico O'Reilly, 21 years old, delivered a performance that defined a final, with the England manager watching from the stands. Guardiola once again demonstrated that his capacity for tactical preparation remains elite, even as his squad continues to reshape around him. But here is what I keep coming back to, and honestly, this is the thought that stayed with me long after the final whistle. The most important match Arsenal played today was not against Manchester City. It was against their own decision-making at the highest level. Every trophy run, every Champions League knockout, every title-deciding moment will eventually arrive at a decision made in the hours before kickoff or in the minutes on a touchline. Wembley gave Arteta one of those decisions, and the outcome of that decision, visible for everyone to see, is what will be studied most carefully in the days ahead. The lesson is there if it is taken seriously. Arsenal have the league, they have Europe, they have a squad that at its best is genuinely capable of winning something that matters this season. The quadruple is gone, and to be honest, the analytical case for it was always fragile. But what remains is still worth fighting for with everything this group has. The question now is a simple one. Does today accelerate Arsenal's growth as a group that makes the right call at the right moment? Or does it stall it? That answer will not come from a press conference. It will not come from a social media statement or a training ground photograph. It will come from the next 90 minutes on a football pitch. Now, I want to hear from you because I know this decision, starting Kepa over Raya in a Wembley final, has split opinion. Was it loyalty gone too far? Was it a calculated risk that simply did not come off? Or do you think there is something else entirely that cost Arsenal this trophy today? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this analysis gave you a different way of looking at today, share it with an Arsenal supporter who needs to hear something beyond the noise tonight. I will see you in the next one.